Good day, track conference attendees. My name is Professor Frank Cronin of Austin Community College. I'm also a member of the Texas chapter of the International Dark Sky Association. And today I know I'm going to share with you some things about our use of light pollution, its dangers and solutions you didn't know anything about. If we ask people to list different kinds of pollution, they're going to mention water pollution, both fresh and saltwater problems. Other people may mention air pollution, especially if they live in large cities. Still others may mention land pollution, with toxic dump waste sites as an example. And I think all of us in the past few years have become a little more aware of our plastic pollution. We're understanding even better than ever that it is not biodegradable. It just gets smaller and smaller. And being microscopic, well, it turns out we're ingesting it in our water and our food. People may even mention noise pollution in our increasingly noisy world. But ladies and gentlemen, few might answer that light is a type of pollution. Human light at night is relatively new, late 1800s, and it was greeted with such enthusiasm because it changed everything. There was a certain beauty to it, if you ask any Parisian of the late 1800s. We get to have more safety and security with those lights at night. We get to continue our daily activities, our jobs, our athletic and family outings. But there are some negatives to this light, and it has negative consequences for life on Earth. There are 4 kinds of light pollution: glare, sky glow, light trespass, and clutter. So you're thinking, what's the problem with this? Person is merely protecting his or her property with this bright light. But glare can work against safety and security. You put a hand up between your eyes and the glare, and all of a sudden, there's that person at the entrance to the backyard who was there the whole time. Hard to see that person because of the glare. We have sky glow. We're sending so much light into the sky. And think about it, my friends, that's wasted light. I wouldn't even have to put that this is Florida on the screen. You could tell by that outline which state you're looking at. And don't forget the Lone Star State. It's very easy to see our major metropolitan areas, the Metroplex, Houston, Austin, and San Antonio, and the string of lights along I-35 that connect them, showing us how much that area is growing. Kyle, Buda, San Marcos, New Braunfels. On the left-hand side of the map, we've got El Paso out there, just about in New Mexico. And between the Metroplex and El Paso, we have I-20. We have Midland, Odessa, and we have a scattering of light around there. That's the oil rigs in the Permian Basin. All that light is going into the sky, being wasted. We've light trespass, when light passes from one property to another. Happens in my backyard. I'm next to a residential or a commercial entity, Oracle Software, a large building full of servers. And when the leaves fall off the trees, fall in winter, their lights come into my backyard, which makes my astronomy a little more difficult. There is light clutter, where we have a lot of different kinds of lights in concentrated areas. You might recognize this as New York City. We often think of Times Square. But also, ladies and gentlemen, Las Vegas, certainly not one of the largest cities in the world, produces with its clutter and sky glow and light trespass more light than any other city in the world. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if there are dangers with other pollution, there must be dangers with light pollution. This is something that people don't necessarily think about, but the science is telling us more and more about it. If those coral reefs are close to the shore and on the shoreline there are human lighting, that can interfere with the reproductive process of the coral because it depends on moonlight to spawn, just that light. Other light can confuse the reef. How long have baby sea turtles been finding their ways to the sea? Hundreds of thousands of years, probably. And all of a sudden, they now have this competitive and confusing light on shorelines. So maybe they are not crawling to the sea. Maybe it isn't so easy for them to notice the reflection of the moon and the Milky Way off the ocean or off the bay, which shows them where to go, back to the water to complete their life cycle. Let's go to even the bottom of the food chain in the oceans, the zooplankton. Nighttime lighting prevents them from rising at night to the upper levels to feed. And of course, if we mess with the basics, the lower level of the food chain, those negative effects will work up the chain. You take one of these birds and take a picture of it, it's probably a beautiful bird, but when they're all thrown together like this, it's a pretty ugly picture. Lighted buildings cause the death of many birds. And you may be right in thinking this must be a urban phenomenon, and it mostly is. We're now being concerned about birds and wind turbines, not always a good combination. But of the three cities in the United States responsible for the largest number of bird deaths, two are in our Lone Star State, Houston and Dallas. Dr. Justice, what an appropriate name for a behavioral ecologist who is concerned about our doing justice to the insects. He points out that when these insects are flying around our lights, parking lots, ball fields, other places, they're just flying around the lights when they should be feeding, finding sex partners, and then having the fun of producing new insects. What about us? Yes, we too, for millennia, have lived without lights at night. And as we adapted to the light-dark cycle of day and night, our adaptations are being put to the test because we don't really have dark nights anymore. The research shows that this can negatively affect sleep. And when you negatively affect sleep, there can be a lot of other problems that result from that. The American Medical Association is so concerned about this, ladies and gentlemen, that in 2016, it issued a report about its concern about the exposure to blue light from outdoor lighting, and even made recommendations to shield lighting and to use bulbs of a certain temperature. But the AMA did not mention those interior lights, especially those lights from our screens. They do disrupt the circadian rhythm by suppressing the production of melatonin, a hormone for sleep. Once again, once you start messing with the sleep and interfering that, you lay yourself open to further maladies, diabetes, heart disease, obesity. Think back to that picture of Florida, that picture of Texas and all that sky glow. Think, ladies and gentlemen, how much money we're wasting. Think about how all that extra lighting has to be supplied by our energy outsources. So to create all that energy, we are polluting. So the overuse and misuse of lights hurts us economically and adds to pollution. Harm to science? Well, let's discuss this. We have a map of West Texas. We have running along the bottom border, I-10 with Fort Stockton in the middle. Joining it is I-20, and we see the lights of Odessa and Midland. And we are seeing three different images, ladies and gentlemen. We are seeing in this image the lighting in 2012, 2016, 2018, and that is the result of the boom in exploration in the Permian Basin area. More rigs, more lights. More lights, more light trespass, more glare, more sky glow. But what's out there in West Texas? What kind of science is going on there? Well, the University of Texas has a McDonald Observatory. 3 telescopes. They do very important work. I've subscribed to Astronomy Magazine for 25 years, and hardly an issue goes by without a reference to some important work being done at McDonald Observatory. Once human light reaches up to 20 degrees above the horizon, that's when there can be problems for astronomers. This is a graphic that shows a little more boldly with the colors the encroaching light on McDonald Observatory, how that has changed between 1997 and 2014. And please understand, since 2014, that is when the boom in the oil drilling in the Permian Basin occurred. So you can imagine how much closer that light is now to McDonald Observatory. So ladies and gentlemen, I may have rocked your world in a negative way by pointing out to you there is a dark side of light, and it's only my job to point out the possible negative effects because we should be aware of them. But don't get me wrong, I'm an optimist. I'm an optimist by feeling, and I'm also an optimist by fact. Here's what we need to keep in mind. Of all the pollutions, light pollution is the easiest to control. We have a choice. Every government agency, every college and university, every business, law or small or large, any community, town, village, city, can decide how they want to do their outside lights. Cutting back on light pollution is a very simple thing to do. All one has to do is adjust how the light is being spread out. I think this visual makes it very clear the choices we have and which is the best. We also have a choice by the color temperature of our lights. To our left, we have the orange and yellow lighting, which is much better for us humans than the shades at the right end. Unfortunately, there's good and bad with our LED light situation. We certainly embraced LED lights. They save us money, they last longer. However, most, if not all, are made in the white to blue-white spectrum. I don't know about you all, but I've noticed in the past few years, I'm driving down a road at night and somebody's coming in the opposite direction. A lot of times I think that driver has the brights on, so I flick my brights on and off. Well, it turns out the driver's just using those regular lights. Those LEDs are so bright. Once again, any entity, whether it's a government, college, university, business, can make simple choices to fix the light fixtures. And as a result of that, the light is better directed. And when light is better directed, you need less of it. Saving money. It appeals to everybody. On the left-hand side of the screen, my friends, we've got unacceptable or discouraged ways to have light fixtures. And notice on the left-hand side of the screen that in most of these examples, the light bulbs are visible. The source of the light is visible. That cuts down on the ability to control the direction of the light. However, the fixtures on the right-hand side of the page are more acceptable. You do not see the light source, that is the bulb, but the fixtures still distribute the light where we need it. I'm also very optimistic about our handling this problem, because part of the solution is just turn them off. Certainly, ladies and gentlemen, we've driven around cities at night looking up at the office buildings. We know the workers aren't there, and we wonder, what are all those lights doing on? And I'm sure if we think about how we use lights at home, we can think of times we've had light on in a room that we weren't in. And do we need as many lights as we do outside our house, and are they directed in the proper way? So communities and institutions can even promote this. Austin is doing a lights out from August 15th to November 30th. So Austin as a city and Travis County as its entity are working together. Because if we do this twice a year during the spring and fall bird migration seasons, we can possibly cut down on our use of light, cut down on light pollution, and cut down on the killing of birds in urban areas. So we're seeing already, my friends, why I'm so positive. We individuals have simple choices we can make within the next week where we live, how we use lights. It is easy to install the kind of fixtures that will use lighting correctly without polluting, thereby saving us money. There's also a legislative avenue. In the most recent Texas legislative session, there were these three House and Senate bills. Notice the one at the bottom of the page is SB 1090. There are also these other House bill and Senate bills looking at communities' use of light in an attempt to regulate that. Of these 7 pieces of legislation, Senate Bill 1090 passed, which would make it easier for communities to pursue international dark sky designations. Ladies and gentlemen, there's money to be made in their hills if the skies are dark. Here's a relatively new term, astrotourism. Yes, there is a niche in tourism of people who are interested in dark skies and traveling those areas and spending their money in those localities to do their astronomy or just be away from the city glare. International Dark Sky Association works with all sorts of entities. And here in Texas, this was announced very recently. Black Gap Wildlife Management Area is designated as an International Dark Sky Sanctuary. This is adjacent to the north border of Big Bend National Park, and it joins the Devil's River State Natural Area over by Del Rio. So progress is being made. Back to the observatory. The observatory is very fortunate to have an employee by the name of Bill Wren. And Bill's job is to work with the communities in the area of the observatory. So, University of Texas and Balmorhea and Valentine and Marfa and Fort Davis and Alpine and Marathon have all signed agreements where these cities have agreed to control the use of their lighting. Bill also works with the oil and gas industry, making visits to their oil rig sites to show them that the way they're using light is ineffective and that a more effective use of lighting can save the companies money and enhance safety. Because if there's glare, there can be accidents because of that glare. So Bill has his focus on this next project to make this whole Big Bend area an international dark sky reserve. I was out in the Big Bend area 3 weeks ago climbing the mountains, and this initiative was all over the radio. Another positive sign. Back to that individual choice to round out my discussion today. We can join organizations by contributing money, time, and energy. We can make a definite dent in our use of light pollution. We can educate people about our use and misuse of light at night. We can make them aware of the definitions of light pollution. We can alert them to the dangers because that's the responsible thing to do. But again, of all the pollutions, light pollution is the easiest to fix. That's why I'm so positive that we will make strides in handling this problem in the next few years. Thank you.